You can project strength. You can project confidence. You can even appear kind, ambitious, and disciplined for a time. But there are subtle pinpoint behaviors that reveal the reality underneath. And Machiavelli understood exactly how to uncover them. In his environment, surrounded by deceivers, opportunists, and cowards, he didn't have the luxury of guessing who was powerful and who was merely noisy. He had to be certain. And he learned fast. Weakness doesn't announce itself. It seeps through the gaps. While those with real strength remain composed and quiet, the weak expose themselves through repeated behaviors they don't even realize. Once you start identifying these habits in rivals, coworkers, or even within yourself, you gain an edge that Machiavelli wielded like a weapon, the ability to detect vulnerability before it becomes dangerous. These behaviors aren't obvious. Most people would miss them, but Machiavelli never did. He observed men the way a predator studies movement. And through this lens, he identified three telltale signs that instantly marked a man as weak. Let's begin with the first and arguably the most discreet over-justification. The insecure explain, the decisive act, thus. That's the difference. A person who constantly defends his decisions, who explains his choices over and over, or tries to make others understand his reasoning isn't being transparent. He's being uncertain. Machiavelli saw this constantly in political chambers. A prince secure in his power said little, but a merchant, a minister, or a man trying to seem important would talk endlessly. He needed others to agree with him in order to believe in his own reasoning. This behavior signaled someone whose identity was built on being liked, not respected, not feared, just liked. And Machiavelli recognized what it truly was, a man pleading for permission to exist. Over-justification is a mask for fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being dismissed, fear of stepping into power. And the truth is, any man who seeks approval before acting can never be entrusted with real authority, because leadership demands silence. It demands certainty. It demands the confidence to take action without needing to justify it. So the next time someone keeps defending their viewpoint, repeating themselves, trying to sound noble, likable, or morally right, what you're actually hearing isn't strength. It's a slow motion unraveling of internal doubt. But that's just the first trait. The second is colder strategic niceness. This form of weakness is the most dangerous because it wears the mask of kindness. Machiavelli understood that the most gutless individuals didn't always look frightened. They looked cheerful, supportive, accommodating, but what they were really showing was submission dressed up as virtue. A strong man can choose to be kind, but it's selective, intentional, and never compromises his self-worth. The weak man, in contrast, tries to be pleasant at all costs. He agrees just to avoid conflict. He flatters to earn favor. He stays silent when he should speak up. He says sorry not because he believes he was wrong, but because he's afraid. And when that fails, when his niceness doesn't get him the approval he needs, he shifts. He turns resentful, sarcastic, passive-aggressive. Why? Because his pleasantness was never genuine. It was a tactic to avoid rejection. And when it fails, his underlying bitterness surfaces. Machiavelli observed this constantly among public figures. He once wrote, "A prince must know how to do wrong and not use it unless compelled." In other words, real restraint is born from strength, not fear. But weaponized niceness always stems from fear. It's the stance of someone who hasn't learned to stand tall on his own. So instead, he shrinks himself, hoping not to be crushed. When you see this pattern, a compulsive kindness that curdles under pressure, you've identified someone unfit for power. Because authentic power requires boundary setting, the ability to say no without regret, and facing conflict without melting behind a fake smile. Machiavelli watched for this trait with intensity because it signaled something crucial. This man's loyalty would collapse the moment it was truly tested. But there's a third sign, more desperate, more revealing, and painfully undignified. And once you spot it, you know you're looking at a man who fears irrelevance more than anything else. The third behavior, the one that made Machiavelli immediately label someone as weak, was addiction to attention. You've encountered it, the man who must always be noticed. The one who can't stay still without someone acknowledging him. The one who floods social spaces with posts, speaks over others, overhypes minor victories, and turns daily life into a stage act. Machiavelli encountered these types often, and he grasped something many still miss. The man obsessed with being seen is terrified of being forgotten. That fear, it's not rooted in hardship or the lack of opportunity. It's a deeper fragility, the decay of identity. Because craving attention is not confidence, it's panic. It's the automatic reaction of someone with no internal stability. They believe that if no one is talking about them, liking them, admiring them, they cease to matter. Their sense of worth vanishes with the attention. And that's exactly why Machiavelli viewed them as dangerous liabilities. These men will do anything for the spotlight, distort the truth, betray a confidence, stir conflict just to remain visible. In their mind, silence equals death. Stillness means being erased, and the worst fate is to go unnoticed. Machiavelli understood a man addicted to the spotlight is a marionette waiting for someone to pull the strings. And if you ever want to destroy him, there's no need to fight you, simply ignore him. Remove the stage, end the applause, make him invisible, and observe how fast he collapses. Because where strong men train in solitude, evolve in quiet, and strike when unseen, the weak can endure even a few moments without recognition. They're predictable, easy to steer, and fundamentally untrustworthy. This is why Machiavelli feared weakness more than wickedness. A wicked man at least understands what he seeks. A weak man, he wants everything, and he'll barter anything to get it. Combine all three traits, the chronic explainer, the falsely kind appeaser, and the attention seeker, and what you have isn't a villain. You get an emptiness. A man so void of identity that he molds himself into the shape of whoever appears stronger. And that's what Machiavelli feared above all, not the loud, not the vicious, but the hollow. Because emptiness is vulnerable to anything, and when the wrong influence fills it, the outcome is often ruin. But Machiavelli didn't stop at spotting weakness. He went further, he leveraged it. He turned these signs into tools, into forecasts, into pressure points. He understood that detecting weakness early could be the difference between influence and betrayal. Because these men don't break when pushed, they dissolve. And in politics and warfare, in enterprise or in trust, you cannot build on a foundation that melts under strain. So how do you shield yourself? How do you behave like Machiavelli? You observe. You stop measuring people by their charm, by their language, by their rank. You start analyzing their patterns, how they respond when they're challenged, when no one's watching, when they aren't rewarded, or when there's no incentive to behave well. You look for fissures, because the strong man doesn't flinch in silence. He builds, he prepares, he strategizes. The weak man, he performs, he explains, he collapses. And once you learn to distinguish between the two instantly, you possess a tool most people never bother to refine: discernment. That's the ability to see not only who someone claims to be, but who they'll become the moment things stop going their way. That's how Machiavelli selected his allies. That's how he kept collapse at bay. And that's how you stay ahead of everyone still fooled by appearances. Because beneath all the crafted words and polished presentation behavior never deceives. Machiavelli didn't just detect weakness, he turned it into elevation. While others met weakness with disdain or impatience, he met it with tactics. Because once you identify a person's emotional blind spot, how they react, how they fear, how they seek acceptance, you don't need to oppose them. You don't even need to push. You just redirect them. Like a string guiding a puppet from behind the veil. He realized something most overlook: the weak crave guidance. They simply don't want to admit they're being led. So Machiavelli offered them exactly what they yearned for: validation. When they felt overlooked, reassurance. When they were insecure, and admiration when they needed to feel valuable. Not out of admiration, but because he saw how malleable they were. This was the source of his true influence. He didn't rely solely on dominance. He didn't issue commands. He let the weak govern themselves by dangling just enough emotional reward to keep them hooked on his approval. Here's how it worked. He'd spot the over-justifier, the one who needed to explain his every move. And instead of challenging him, Machiavelli would listen. He'd nod, maintain eye contact, say, "That's perfectly reasonable." And just like that, the man would latch onto him, desperate for more of that rare approval, willing to back him, defend him, even spy on his behalf. All because Machiavelli made him feel understood. But it was never about empathy, it was about control. Then he turned to the people pleaser, the man desperate to be liked, agreeable, and helpful. He offered him a role, gave him a sense of purpose, Let him feel secure, like he had finally earned a place in something greater. And that man, he would never betray Machiavelli. Not out of true allegiance, but because turning against him would mean losing the only thing anchoring his fragile identity. And then there was the attention seeker, the man who inhaled recognition like air. To him, Machiavelli handed the spotlight. He let him speak at gatherings, let him take public credit for strategies that served Machiavelli's agenda. He allowed him to wear the appearance of influence while Machiavelli remained the true author behind the curtain. Because he understood if you give a weak man the illusion of authority, he'll never stop to question where the real control lies. This is how empires are built, not with violence, not with conquest, but through psychological architecture. You identify the fragile. Then you let them construct your throne from their hunger to be accepted, validated, and acknowledged. And if they ever turn on you, there's no need for confrontation. You simply withdraw your attention. Let them unravel in silence. Let them self-destruct, trying to reclaim the power they never truly held. Because nothing dismantles a weak man faster than being ignored by the one whose recognition wants to find him. This is the Machiavellian method of managing weakness. You don't argue. You don't humiliate. You turn their flaws into instruments. While they perform for approval, you remain still, silent, calculating. While they chase validation, you accumulate influence. But Machiavelli had one more principle, perhaps the most ruthless of all. Never let a weak man believe he's your equal. Because the moment he does, he forgets who made him. He reaches too far, he imagines rebellion. So you maintain distance. You reward just enough to keep him moving. Never enough for him to feel self-sufficient. And if he ever steps out of line, you don't punish. You replace, because the world is full of weak men hungry for validation. But there is only one of you. This is the Machiavellian path. Not control through coercion, but through insight. Not managing individuals, but shaping their insecurities until they call it loyalty. You don't need rank. You don't need a throne. You don't even need to raise your voice. All you need is clarity and stillness. Machiavelli understood that the most powerful form of manipulation doesn't look like manipulation at all. It looks like friendship. It looks like guidance. It looks like quiet influence. Because weak men are always scanning the room not for truth, but for cues. They move toward affirmation like insects to light. And once you grasp that, you can mold their behavior without saying a word. This is how Machiavelli navigated royal courts, political games, and shifting alliances, all without ever having to raise a sword. He let the weak come to him, and then he stepped into a role. He became the silent observer to the man who over-explained, the steady leader to the people-pleaser, the hidden strategist behind the spotlight-chasing puppet. He didn't push against their weaknesses. He fueled them just enough to keep them loyal. And in return, he earned allegiance without lifting a finger. He gained supporters without asking. He received obedience without commands. This is what you need to grasp if you seek real Machiavellian influence. The most potent form of control is the one no one notices. It's when they believe the decisions were theirs all along. When they think following you was their own idea. When they feel honored to serve you not because you insisted, but because you never had to. Let's break it down more clearly. First, say less than expected. The more fragile the man, the more he craves verbal reassurance. So instead, you remain quiet, not passively, but intentionally. Let them reveal too much. Let them talk themselves into guilt, loyalty, or even admiration. And when you do speak, make it count. A rare compliment, a brief nod, a simple piece of advice in their mind, it's priceless. They chase it. They dwell on it. Now they're no longer working beside you, they're serving something deeper inside themselves that you created. Second, be the calm in their chaos. Weak men operate through emotional outbursts. They panic at sudden changes. They swing too far when criticized. They spiral when ignored. You, however, remain composed. You move with purpose. You become the still point in their storm. That contrast makes them see strength in you, even when you never claim it. They begin to think he knows something I don't. He's steady. I should follow his path. They assign strength to you because their own identity is falling apart. And once that projection begins, your influence becomes total, yet invisible. Third, make your rewards unpredictable. This is where most fail to understand Machiavellian strategy. You don't hand out praise on a schedule. You don't make your approval a given. You stay enigmatic. Some days you acknowledge them. Some days you are absent. Sometimes you offer a gesture. Sometimes you don't even meet their eyes. Because uncertainty breeds dependence. They never know when your attention will come, so they keep striving. They keep speculating. They keep mentioning you. You become not just a guide, but an obsession. And here begins real psychological dominance. Because once they start needing your presence, your insight, your approval, they begin to fear losing it. You don't need to scold them. Your silence does the work. You don't need to correct them. Your absence becomes the punishment. And now you own them. Not through intimidation, not through threats, but through a subtle, profound tether emotional dependency. This is the science of spotting fragile men and turning them into the architecture of your rise. And the best part, they'll never realize it. They'll name it admiration. They'll call it loyalty. They'll think it was their decision. But you'll know the truth. You notice the fractures. You observe their actions. And while they scrambled to stay loud, you elevated yourself in silence. Like Machiavelli, there was one threat he feared even more than enemy plots: the betrayal of weakness from within. He understood a truth most people still avoid. Weakness isn't just something you notice in others. It's something you must relentlessly confront in yourself. Because it rarely shows up in obvious ways. It creeps in quietly through excessive explaining, through the desire to be liked, through the hunger for praise, through the moments you should have spoken, but stayed silent, through the apologies you gave, not out of guilt, but out of fear. Machiavelli saw self-discipline as a battlefield, one you fight every single day. And if you lost even a single skirmish, the world would see the fracture before you even recognized it. So he developed a method, a personal detection system for spotting weakness the moment it whispered in his thoughts. Here's how he approached it. First, he monitored how he justified himself. When you're confident, you act. When you're insecure, you explain. Machiavelli trained himself to catch moments where he talked too much, repeated himself, or modified his message to suit others. Each time he asked, am I speaking from certainty or from the need to be accepted? If it was the latter, he shut it down, because he knew a man who pleads for approval surrenders authority. Second, he tracked how often he said yes. Many believe yes is a virtue, but Machiavelli saw it as a risk. A weak yes can destroy leadership, whether said to avoid discomfort, to win favor, or to bypass confrontation. He conditioned himself to pause before every agreement and ask, would I still say yes if I didn't care about their approval? If the answer was no, he declined unapologetically. Because once your words lose weight, so does your influence, even in your own eyes. Third, he studied how silence made him feel. Fragile men fear silence. They rush to break it with jokes, compliments, explanations, because silence unmasks truth. Machiavelli, on the other hand, turned silence into a weapon. He trained in it, especially in chaotic rooms. He measured his own comfort in stillness. And when it felt uncomfortable, he stayed there. Why? Because mastered silence becomes presence. And that presence, when honed, becomes quiet intimidation. Fourth, he avoided needless visibility. The weak crave attention. The strong man selects his moment. Machiavelli practiced being unseen. He watched others chase recognition. He remained in the background, waiting until the perfect moment. And when he did act, it wasn't perceived as progress. It was viewed as an arrival. He didn't generate suspense with promises. He built it with absence. So when he finally spoke or moved, people froze. It wasn't luck, it was intentional, disciplined, strategic. He eliminated every sign of internal fragility long before the world could ever use it against him. Because Machiavelli wasn't just preparing to lead, he was sealing every opening that could later be used to bring him down. And that's where most people fall short. They work hard to appear powerful, but never pause to ask, am I addicted to praise? Do I avoid rejection at all costs? Do I speak to express, or just to be agreed with? Do I need approval before I can lead? Am I explaining things that silence would have said better? These aren't just questions of weakness. They expose your boundaries. And once you see them, you only have two paths: nurture them and remain stagnant, or eliminate them and become someone the world can't ignore. Because in today's world, you're not punished for being harsh. You're punished for being predictable, reactive, and emotionally fragile. So you strip it away word by word, decision by decision, until the day comes when your words stop people in their tracks. Your movements cause shifts. Your presence commands direction. Because they won't see someone trying to appear strong, they'll see someone tempered by silence. Respect isn't requested, it's not pleaded for, and it's never handed over, it's constructed. And Machiavelli understood the formula. He knew that the most lasting form of respect, the kind that persists even when you're not there, the kind that silences others before you even speak, comes from one core thing: mastery over what terrifies fragile men the most. Because weak men fear discomfort. They fear being misunderstood. They fear not being liked. They fear standing alone in a noisy room. But the Machiavellian individual, he embraces all of it. He doesn't run from conflict. He steps directly into it. He doesn't shatter under scrutiny. He sharpens. Because when you eliminate the need to defend yourself, when you abandon applause-seeking, when you erase every habit born from fear, you become something unfamiliar to the average person. Something they can't read, something they can't touch. And that's exactly why respect begins to form. Not because you're loud, not because you're agreeable, but because you reveal nothing and that unsettles them. It's human instinct. We fear what we cannot understand. So when you enter a room with nothing to prove, when your posture holds while others crack, when your silence lands heavier than their best arguments, you flip the balance. You don't chase validation, you become the standard. People instinctively adjust around you. They speak more cautiously. They weigh their words because they fear appearing weak in your presence. Why? Because you've mastered the internal war they haven't. You've killed the constant craving for affirmation. You've silenced the needy voices. You've made solitude your ally, which makes your approval rare. And rare things always carry value. This is the final Machiavellian principle. Make your respect expensive. Don't give it freely. Don't compliment without cause. Don't smile just to be polite. Make others earn it. Because once they realize that charm, pressure, or popularity can't sway you, they'll rise to your level or vanish. Either way, you win. You either attract stronger allies or uncover those too fragile to stand alongside you. This is how true authority is established, not by loud declarations of power, but by a presence that speaks for itself. The kind that makes people quietly wonder, why does he unsettle me? Why do I care about his opinion? What is he seeing that I can't? That's not intimidation, that's presence. And presence is created by eliminating every behavior that reveals weakness, not just in others, but in yourself. Because once you've done that, once your words are deliberate, your silence intentional, and your sense of self immovable, you become what Machiavelli valued most, a man who doesn't just command respect, he eliminates the option not to. Not through domination, not through fear, but through precision, through calibrated behavior, so steady, so unmoved, that it sets the standard others must rise to. You become the silent gauge of their inadequacy, the reflection of what they haven't yet mastered, the reminder that true strength never needs an introduction. So let the fragile expose themselves. Let them speak. Let them crave attention. Let them chase ease. And while they're busy doing that, you build quietly and sharply until one day they can't look away. And they'll never quite grasp how they were defeated by someone who never even stepped onto their playing field. That's the final lesson. You don't reveal weak men by challenging them. You reveal them by having no need to. That is Machiavellian mastery.